Hello all, and welcome as I take you on a journey through an introduction to our Markdown workshop. And there are a couple of requirements for this workshop. And so I have a web browser open with Google activated. And in order to use our Markdown, the feature, you must first download and install the statistical software R. And that will, I click on the link cloud.r-project. Nope, sorry, first link, r-project.org, where I can, right here, download R. And R is a programming language where I can download it for right here. I actually did have the correct link on the first time. I can download R for a Linux machine, a Mac machine, or a Windows machine. And it's free to use, so use it up. That is the first task, to download and install R. And the R programming language related to our Markdown is used to create the figures and the numbers and to do all of the statistics that will be included in my report. The second step, prerequisite, is to download and install Rstudio, which is used more so as the platform to integrate with R and to create my report. Rstudio is sick. It uses the features of R in a far more user-friendly interface, and it even adds additional features that the normal R just can't do. One instance is RMarkdown. RMarkdown can only be done using Rstudio. So I download Rstudio, and I'm gonna back her up to where I just had a fresh Google page because I can guarantee I will be using this for later on. But I initiate Rstudio by either opening the start menu, I see Rstudio, and I already have it up. So I'm just going to activate the window. And I'm presented here with the console window where I can type my commands. And normally I would get going by just saying File, New File, and RMarkdown. But if that option is not present for you, you must make sure to install the package and to load the package for RMarkdown. And to install the package, I type the command install.packages inside of parentheses and quotation marks. I type in RMarkdown. I press enter to submit the command, and I wait for Rstudio to complete running of installation the RMarkdown package. And while I wait for this to happen, I'll mention that if I were to ever do some research on my own, I would use RMarkdown because it's all done in one simple, user-friendly, and easy-to-use platform. I'm not going back and forth between my stats software and my manuscript in a Word file and back and forth between the output and the manuscript and the output and the manuscript, and so confusing. Everything in RMarkdown is all in the same file. So it's simple. My RMarkdown package has loaded, So now I initiate the library command to load my package, and so that I can use the RMarkdown feature. Now it's loaded, no error messages. I mouse on up to File. I go to New File, and I see the option of RMarkdown. I click it naturally. And I'm brought with the options to create my header. What am I going to call my finished report? I'll just call it, I'll call it report. And I'm going to start with just creating a document. But if I wanted to, I could create PowerPoint slides using RMarkdown. I can create interactive documents that change as my data changes using RMarkdown, but I'll stick with creating a PDF report. I'm going to call it report. I have my author name in there, and so I press OK to initiate RMarkdown. Hey, and this is so cool because RMarkdown probably guesses that you're not familiar with this. And it provides you with a sample file that I can run and view the results. Awesome. And I'm going to do just that. Quickly glancing at this file, though, I see this here enclosed with 3 hyphens to start, 3 hyphens to finish is my header, my title of the report. I see in the normal kind of colored font and nothing really is where I would just normally type like it's a Word document with adding some different text for formatting. And I can also add, down here and here is where they've included R code to import their results. Look like they're doing the summary command and they're creating a plot that will be in their output. So I had first wanted to create an RMarkdown file from scratch, but geez, it's really tough now with this sample file staring me right in the face. I think I'm going to create this sample file just to see what it looks like before I embark on creating my own Markdown report. Right here from the text, when you click the knit button, a document will be generated. I scroll up to knit or knit or however you want to pronounce it. I select the arrow for knit options and I want it to export as a PDF file. Now right here, R automatically opens up a save file. And my first thought is, oh, it wants me to save the PDF file that I'm going to create, right? Wrong. It's asking me to save my RMarkdown file. And so I'll assign a name to it. I'll call the RMarkdown file practice. And this part is key because it does not come with a default save type. I have to make sure that after my file name, I include the extension. So I add a period at the end of my file name, capital RMD for RMarkdown kind of file, and I press save. So now I have saved my RMarkdown file. I see down at the bottom with my console tab where I would type my R commands, RMarkdown window comes up and it gives me notes on the status of the run. So if I ever had problems or issues, error messages, then I'd find them here in this RMarkdown window. I don't expect any problems. I certainly would hope that the sample file that RMarkdown provides is actually correct and works without any changing. And so I wait for the PDF output to be generated. Aha, and here it is. I'm actually going to move this over a bit, and I want to look at the features of the output compared to what is written in the RMarkdown sample file. So I see report is my title, that's present. I have me as the author, they threw in the date on purpose. I exported a PDF file, and this first code chunk is actually where you'd expect we'd put our code, but they're using this as a default option code chunks for code chunks moving forward. So I'm not going to talk about that. But I will say right here in the RMarkdown file, 2 hashtags or pound signs at the beginning of the row, followed by a space, would be how you include your N-level titles. So I say N-level because 2 hashtags means your second level heading. If I put 3 of them, that'd be 3-level heading. And this is, what it looks in the output. And then I see, it looks like in this section right here, the user is just typing like it's a normal Word document. And that's exactly what's happening. They're typing text that goes into their first paragraph, just like typing into Word. Sure, there's some minor differences and nuances, like they added a clickable link here by enclosing the link inside of carets. This right here, the knit button in the output, is bolded text. So enclosing text with 2 asterisks or stars in a row will bold the text in between. And also, round is right here, this code chunk summary of the cars. They're doing a basic 5-number summary of this system data set cars, where it shows the 5-number summary. And it also shows the code there too. So if anybody were to see my output and be like, hey now, how did you get those numbers? I could be like, boom, the code is right above. That's how I got the numbers. I didn't even copy and paste it. It's coming straight from the program. And I scroll down some more to see, yeah, they put a plot in there too, pretty nice. They decided to use the echo equals false option in this plot. I guess they didn't want to include the display of the code above the graph. That's what that echo equals false means. And that's all I'll talk about with this sample file before I create my own personal file, from scratch. Because I think that the true mastery of programming comes from diving right in and typing in the program yourself, encountering errors and solving them. So I'm actually going to, in my PDF output, I'm going to click on the link that it provides me to open up that link. And this brings me to the RMarkdown sample page. For anybody who just wants to search this from Google, I could go, and honestly from Google, I'd search RMarkdown. And the first page that comes up is the same link from what I got in the sample documentation. I just Google searched RMarkdown and I clicked on the first link, rmarkdown.rstudio.com. And if I wanted to go through a very, very quick tutorial, which I'm going to do that in this workshop, so I'm not going to go through it. But if you like text learning, along with maybe video learning. Then I scroll down to this Get Started option. I click it, and I see these are all the big features of RMarkdown. Is there more than this? Yes. But these are the basic features. And I'm going to actually use this link, some of these, to reference some more helpful resources. So this is a good resource. I'll click on the cheat sheet and open that in a new tab. That is another helpful resource. Me personally, I'm not crazy about the cheat sheet. I think it's pretty jumbled and it's all over the place. And right now I can't even open it. Let's see if I can through other methods. Got an error message with viewing the cheat sheet at first, but here we go. Try again. Here's the cheat sheet. Again, I think it's kind of jumbled. It's pretty crazy. Me personally, it's not for me. But hey, who am I to tell you or anybody how to program, how they do things? It's just not my speed. Now, what is my speed is the second link, the RMarkdown reference guide. And this resource I like. This actually shows me, hey, remember that part in the RMarkdown sample file where it just looked like normal text? Well, that's exactly what they show me right here. Sorry. They show, well, this is normal text, and these are the other options that I can do to format the text. Italics, bold font, superscripts, all the kinds of headers, adding a clickable link to my RMarkdown file, along with many other options. So I'm going to reference this thoroughly throughout this workshop. I'll actually just keep that up. But I'll go back to RMarkdown, and I'm going to highlight everything in here that the sample files provided, and I'm going to say, see you later. It was nice what you provided me as a reference, but I'm going to go my own way, and I'm going to create my own RMarkdown file, and I suggest the same. Looking at my RMarkdown guide here, gosh, I see plain text. I want to add another header in here. So I'll add an hashtag, the space, and I'll say the start of my report will be a purpose. This is the purpose of my report. This is the purpose of my demo. I add a new line and I start texting like it's normal Word. Say, here is what I will accomplish. I'm going to use a system data set. And that's what's great about this workshop here is all versions of R and Rstudio come included with this system data set. So we're not going to be downloading anything unless you want to. We're not going to download anything. We're just going to use what R has in its registry. So I'm going to use the system data set. I want to definitely create a plot. And I also want to create a regression at 1.2. I want to do a 2-sample t-test at some point. And lastly, I want to, well, I guess I'll print the variables. Export to a PDF. Kind of messy at the moment. But I am going to roll on back to my guide here that they provide me. Gosh, I keep doing that. And I'm going to look for, I want to create an unordered list, a bulleted list of my elements here. So I scroll down and I say, oh, okay. A list begins with an asterisk or a star. It looks like a space, and then that's where I begin my list items. All right, simple enough. I'll jump back to my RMarkdown file. I'll start a new line and I'll start it with a star and a space. Objectives. These are my objectives. And I said I wanted to, let's put these in order. I'll print variables of importance. I'll create a plot. I'll generate regression equation, and I will perform a t-test. And this is all using a system dataset. So actually, I keep talking about this system dataset. We haven't seen anything about it yet. So maybe I'll do that first. And the system dataset, I scroll down to my console window here, as this is where I'm going to be testing my commands to make sure that they work. If I add an R command or R code to my Markdown file, I want to be 100% sure that it's not going to create an error. How embarrassing that would be. But the data set is called mtcars. I was just typing that out to show you what it's spelled. But I'll initiate the command str in parentheses. I'll place mtcars, as that will give me a description of all of the variables in this data set, its name, which I'll have to remember those for later, its type of variable, and some of the output. And that's all I'll do for now. It shows me 11 variables, there's 32 rows, and the variables of interest for me in this case are MPG must stand for miles per gallon. WT, probably the weight of the car. Hey, that could be something interesting to create a plot of. Plot the miles per gallon based off the weight. I'll include that here in my list. MPG versus weight. So I'm interested in the miles per gallon. I'm interested in the weight of the car. And while I'm at it, if I'm creating a plot of miles per gallon versus weight, I might as well do the regression equation off that too. So I'll say add to my list, predict MPG based on weight. Very simple regression, but I'm just here to talk about the Markdown features. And my final variable of interest is this variable called AM. Now, I did a little bit of background research, and the AM variable stands for a binary variable. It takes a value of 1 or 0. A value of 0 means that it is an automatic variable. And give me a second while I fix these problems of my internet. Problems fixed, and back to my description of the AM variable. A binary variable, it is 0, meaning it's an automatic car, and the value of 1 means it's a manual car. So for my t-test, I'm going to test miles per gallon based on automatic and manual cars. Hey. And so that will, complete my goals, my objectives. And before I get ahead of myself, I like to continually save and produce the PDF output of my report like one step at a time, just to make sure that, once I make an addition to my file, I know, well, if there's an error along the way, then it's probably what I added most recently. Plus, I want to make sure that this list worked out properly. I want to see what my file looks like from scratch. So I select knit to PDF. Rstudio, by default, knows that I want to save the file, so it overwrites the saved file that I had, and it begins to create my RMarkdown PDF file, the first iteration of many for my report. My output gets created, and what's this? I mean, I had thought I created a list here, a bulleted list. I expect to see a bulleted list, and RMarkdown treated it as if it was still just normal text. Wait, what's going on here? And further, I see in my RMarkdown file, I added new lines between each little asterisk, each star. Why does it not be on a new line? Some problem solving to do. And I'm gonna jump to my documentation right here. And I see, well, there's not much that could have been screwed up with the list here. I mean, a star, here's my item. What else do I need? And here it is, something I completely glanced over. And a line with 2 spaces to start a new paragraph. That has got to be where my problem is. So I go over here and I see, oh, when I finished this sentence before I started my unordered list, I just pressed enter. I need to make sure to add 2 empty spaces there to tell Rstudio, or RMarkdown rather, to create a new paragraph, just like it says in the documentation. So I add those 2 spaces, and I'm going to knit to a PDF again. And I think, this should solve my problems. Thank you, documentation, for all the help that you've provided me. And I go back and I see my output, and it's still not the way I want it to. Hey, one step at a time, I was able to add this to be a new line, but now it's still not an unordered list. So I'm going to go back to my documentation and see if I can find anything with this unordered list. Maybe it's this colon after that right there. Maybe I'll add, another line after this. It could be a couple things. So I try some things and I see what result I will get. Okay, I go up to my line here. I make sure there are, in fact, 2 spaces between this period and the new line. All right, 1 space, there's 2. And I removed the colon from my objectives here. Maybe that will solve the problem. So I knit to a PDF again and hope that the output will have actually the bulleted list like I want, and not with just the stars at the beginning like I don't want. And lures, haha, I did it! With the combination of making sure that there were 2 spaces after this, I added a new free line before I started the unordered list. I removed the colon. I'm actually going to put the colon back there. Whoa. I'm going to put the colon back there for testing future. Was it the line? Was it I didn't just have enough spaces? But I fixed that problem. Yahoo! Now it's time to move on. I have my objectives. Now I'm going to proceed. I'm going to add 2 spaces at the end of that line in case I need it. I'm going to start a 2-level heading with 2 hashtags at the beginning. And I'm going to call this data set variables. Those are, the variables that I'm interested in. And looking at my console window again, I was interested in the MPG, miles per gallon. I'm interested in the weight of the car. How do those 2 relate? And I'm interested in the automatic and the manual cars. Which one, are they equal? Do they have equal miles per gallon, or are they different? So I begin by saying important variables for me are, and I'm going to add some formatted text in here. I go to my documentation and I remember that bold text is enclosed in asterisks, 2 asterisks in a row or 2 stars in a row. So I add 2 stars. I'm interested in MPG. I'm interested in the weight. I'm actually going to spell these out. Miles per gallon. I'm interested in the weight. And lastly, automatic or manual. I make sure to enclose with the double stars, and you see, hey, it's color-coded, probably doing something right. And I'll add a period and 2 spaces to start a new line. And this is where I get to my first element of the Markdown. Before I was just including text and formatting it, but now I'm actually going to embed some R code into this report, just like the sample file had done for me. And this is called a code chunk. And there's a couple ways to create a code chunk. I'll start with up here at the top. If I mouse to the top, it says insert with the logo, a plus symbol, and a C right next to the run option. I click the down arrow and I want to insert some R code. You'll also recognize that I can include Python code if I want to as well, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to stick with R. And I click that button and R automatically places in a code chunk for me, where it begins with 3 backticks and it ends with 3 backticks. Just like the header begins with 3 hyphens, it ends with 3 hyphens. Except after the backticks, we open and close brackets and include the character lowercase r to tell our Markdown, hey, get ready. Here comes some R coding provided by yours truly. And this is just like programming in R. What I type enclosed in these backticks is exactly what I would expect the output to be when I type in the console window. So this is how I want to do it. I want to type my commands in the console window as a test to make sure that they work perfectly. And once they work the way I want them to, I will copy and paste them up here to my code chunk. So I type mean. I'll take the average of my MT cars data set, the miles per gallon variable. What's the average? Overall average. Okay, that command worked. And now I want to also print the standard deviation. That's what I'll do for my numeric variables of miles per gallon and weight. I'm going to print its average and its standard deviation. So I type std for standard deviation. I initiate the data set that I'm activating, and then the variable, miles per gallon. I press enter, and oh Lord, it could not find the function std. Well, it slipped my mind that the function for calculating the standard deviation is not std, it's just sd. And to prove that, if I use the built-in help documentation of R, I type a question mark, I type SD, and I press enter, and over here in the window to the right shows my help manual. The function computes the standard deviation of the value. I had intentionally typed that command wrong so that I could show. I want to type my commands in the console here before I put them into my report. I don't want any errors to happen in my report from coding. So I type SD, empty cars, miles per gallon. And that command worked. So I'm actually going to, I'll take this mean command and I'm gonna paste it up above. I take this average command and I'm gonna paste that up above as well. And all the while that I'm doing this, I'm going to include comments. This is where it may get a bit confusing, but I begin this line with a hashtag. Now, wait a second. I thought a hashtag meant that I am creating a header. And that is true, but not when I am inside of these enclosed backticks. A hashtag means just a comment. And a comment is a message from me to myself, my future coding self, or to other researchers. And I like to add comments just to say, so if I look through my program, I don't need to understand what the program does by looking at the commands. I can look at the comments above the commands and say, oh, that one calculates the average. That does the mean. So I'll say average of miles per gallon. And there's no point in testing this command in the console because it's just a comment. R doesn't interpret this. I'll copy it and paste it in the console just as proof, but those are only messages for me. R does not run those. I'll add another comment that says standard deviation of miles per gallon. Very good. And so I want to do the same thing for the average of the weight variable. I'm just showing right now in the console window, it's really just the same command. I'm actually going to use the commands I'm copied and paste into my Markdown file, and I'll copy them below and just change the variable name. Weight, I'll change my comment to say average weight of car. Standard deviation for cars weight. And I make sure to change the variable name too. Aha! So I've got some nice basic kind of summary statistics. But my other variable of interest is the AM variable, automatic manual cars. It's a binary variable, takes a value of 1 or 0. So I'm going to choose to calculate frequency counts. I'll use the table command and inside of parentheses, the data set and the variable AM to show, okay, I remember that 0 means an automatic car and 1 means a manual car. So there's 19 automatics and 13 manual cars. I copy that command. I paste it into my R code chunk below a comment that I add, frequency counts of cars. And I'll say, actually, I'll include that. And then at the bottom, I'll include a comment that says 0 represents automatic. 1 represents manual. And I'll pause on the screen here for a second in case people want to type out what I have provided. But I've created my code chunk. I've created a new paragraph in my report. I want to see, well, how does it look? What's it going to look like in my PDF? So I go up here to knit. I'm going to knit this as a PDF. And I wait for the options. I remember that I also went back and added this colon to the unordered list, the bulleted list. I wonder if that will have an influence. Probably not, but we'll find out with this running of the PDF file. Next up, I'm going to create a graph. I'll talk about the options that can be included in a code chunk. And after that, I'll talk about inline codes, which I think is the most coolest. Now, the best part of RMarkdown, the inline codes, where I can insert our code or the results of our code right in the middle of a paragraph. See, it's not as easy using this code chunk for importing it right in the middle. I'd say the code chunks are more for, showing a huge portion of results or a figure, or used for preparation to be used in inline codes later on. And now, here is my output, finally. I see, well, adding the colon to my unordered list really didn't change that, so it must have been the 2 spaces that I was not doing properly, or perhaps this entirely new line that I included, just blank. I think that was probably the solution. We'll test that in the next run. But I see, so here is the R code chunk. I had bolded some of these text in here, but here's my R code chunk. And it prints a copy of the commands that I used, and it also prints a copy of the output. And it looks pretty cool. It looks a little bit messy, if I'm going to be honest, but I was just talking about a code chunk and the output. Later on in this report, I'm going to use code chunks, but also inline to make it more neat, more suitable towards actually being a report. But inside of this code chunk, anything can be created that is related to R coding. Any R code can go inside there. I'm going to create a new title. Well, new heading. It'll be called The Plot. And I'm going to scatter plot of the miles per gallon based on the weight of the vehicle. And that was actually kind of a boring sentence right there. I'm thinking maybe I could add some helpful or cool looking kind of font here. And oh yeah, I actually will include a link is what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to link these helpful information, these helpful pages at the bottom of my page. So I copy this link. I actually go to this documentation and says, oh, all right, I include a square bracket, I type the text link, and then I include my link in parentheses. So then I'll add, I'll even put this in italics font. But first, below are helpful resources for learning RMarkdown. I add 2 spaces at the end of my line to make sure that I put these links on a new line. That's going to come up all the time. And I remember the syntax. I open up square brackets. I type the text link. Then in parentheses, I paste the link. And I'm going to do that for all of these. The cheat sheet that they provide, I'm going to do that for the cheat sheet. I'm going to do it for my reference guide, just to show another little formatting of text here. Another feature of RMarkdown, I could add, I added a link. I could add an image too if I wanted to. If I add an image on my filing system, I could probably download one, put it right in. This is the link that I want. So there's the link. I'll add another 2 spaces at the end of my line because I'm just getting used to that. Make sure that I start new paragraphs. And I'm going to say, here comes the graph. And I'll add 2 lines again in a space, or a new line. But as in programming, there's always more than one way to accomplish the same task. And this may be a simple example of that case, but there's more than one way to create an R code chunk. I could use the mouse up here like I did before, but programming is about preference and freedom, and I don't like that method. So I'm going to create my code chunk the old-fashioned way. I'll start with 3 backticks. And I begin with curly brackets, just like I see up here, really just kind of copying the case. I type R in there, as this is the minimum requirements for a code chunk. But I like to be more organized than just that. I like to assign a name to my code chunk. I'm going to call it graph. And now I'm going to get into the options of a code chunk. After the name of the code chunk, I include a comma and a space. I'm gonna fly back to my documentation that I've been pumping this whole time. And this is why I like this documentation a lot, because at the very bottom, it shows all of the possible chunk options. These options would alter your output, is exactly what they do. Right here, the echo option, echo equals false, will make it so, we saw that in the example, but the code will not be included in the output. It'll just be the output. The include option here, and we see that all of these options have defaults. So by default, with a code chunk, R is going to paste the code with it. That's why in here, it pastes the code. because by default, it expects we want that. And I didn't tell R otherwise, so that's what it does. But for this graph, I'm going to exclude the code, and I'm going to scroll down some more for all of these plot code options. And what interests me right off the bat, my figure align option could be left, right, or center. My caption to the figure, I'm definitely going to add one of those. My figure height, my figure width by default is 7, so I can use that as my reference and alter it from that. And that's what I'll start with for now. I go back to R. I say the echo option, yes, set that to false. Now, I'm going to have to go back to this documentation all the time. Fig.align. And I make sure to separate each code chunk option with a comma. See, if I say fig.align is the first option. Oh, it gives me even set up options. This is nice. I want my figure to be left aligned. Now, if I see, I said I wanted the fig.cap to add a caption to the figure. Wait, hold on. How come I didn't get a pre-filled in option with Rstudio guessing, do you want to do fig caption? And it's because I need to include a comma between my chunk options. See, now it shows up. And I say it's equal to, and my caption will be what I type and what I enclose in quotation marks. Here we see a graph showing the relationship between a car's weight and miles per gallon. That will be my caption of the image. I like that. And I make sure to balance out the quotation marks. And lastly, I'm going to add the options of fig.height. I remember from my documentation that the default figure height width is 7. Now, I kind of want my figure to not be as tall as 7 inches. I think 7 inches based off of a 12-inch sheet of paper, that's a bit much for me. I'm going to set my to be equal to 4. And I'm going to also change my fig width. And I want that to be a little bit wider than 7 inches. I want it to be 8 inches. So the figure is twice as wide as it is long. Hey, I'm going to put 2 empty lines. And here's where I'll start my programming. I'll add a comment. I'm not going to actually type the code in here just yet because I want to test it out in the console window. But I'm going to say graph code below. Great comment. I activate my console window and I go down, and I know from experience that the plot command is what I'm going to use. But yeah, I don't know all the aspects of the plot command, so I'm going to jump to the built-in syntax that R provides me. I type a question mark, followed by the name of the command or function I want information on. I press enter, and R over here, I did say I wanted a default scatter plot, so I'll roll with that. And R provides me with the documentation, along with many, many other options as well. I'm going to add a title to this graph. I'm going to add labels to the X and Y axis, obviously. And also in this documentation, usually at the bottom, they show examples. Hey, that's nice. Very good. So I'm going to kind of use these examples, but not so much. just to mention that. I will test my command in the console window. Plot. I'll say my X variable is the weight. My Y variable is the miles per gallon. Going based off the syntax to the right, I initiate the main equals option to put a title in there. I'll say weight. Yeah. Weight versus MPG. I'm going to add, just looking at my syntax, the x-axis label, which will be weight of the car, and my y-axis label, all separated by commas, just like the options of the code chunk. This is miles per gallon. Hey! Now, how did that go? I didn't get any error messages. I see that, well, the plot did get created. Cool. So I'm going to copy that command that I know works from the console window. I'll paste it into my code chunk. And I make sure that if I'm creating this code chunk the old-fashioned way like I'm doing, that I need to enclose it with 3 backticks to tell R, this marks the end of the R code that you are including. Again, I've gotten to my next juncture. I want to, again, knit this to a PDF to make sure that everything is going smoothly. I do that. I knit to a PDF, and I wait for the output to be created to my PDF. A nice little heartwarming thing that I see right now, there's no error messages so far. So it looks like my addition of these formatted text where I added the italics and I added the clickable links, there weren't any problems with that. That's great. You love to see that. And once this output gets created, I'll analyze it and I'll move on. Okay, here's my output. I'm going to check it out. I already did the unordered list. I did the code chunk, but here we go. Aha, but first is italics. Something going on with these links here. I thought I would be able to click on them. It looks like they worked kind of, but not really at all. So I'll have to fix that. It does show some of that, but I'll address that later. And here we have this nice little graph. I do really like how I formatted it so it is wider like this, and it is left aligned technically. So this is good. Here's the caption that I had given to the figure, and it even by default labeled it figure 1. Hey, that's nice. I click close. I'm going to quickly scroll up to this link edition to see what I really did wrong here. I'm not entirely sure. Of course, I do have some alternative solutions, so I'll keep that where it is for now. And I'll move on with what I was doing. And I'm going to now do the, well, let's take a look at my objectives. Print the variables of importance, check. Create a plot, which I just did. Now I want to generate a regression equation. Predict the miles per gallon based on the weight. And also this next part, perform a t-test. I'm gonna say those both fit into the category of a results section, don't you think? I type results, and I'm going to say, I will predict the miles per gallon based on the weight of the car. I say building off the graph I created above. I'm going to add 2 spaces and a new line, and here is where I get to the inline code of R. So fascinating. Normally, I would think to create a regression equation, I'd probably include that in a code chunk. But I'm not going to this time. I'm going to include it in an inline code, which is takes the pieces of a code chunk and puts them in the middle of a paragraph. So I start it with a backtick. I type the letter R, just like I would start a code chunk. And now after this point, I just type R code like I would do in the console window. Of course, I go down to my console window. I need to know how a regression equation works. I'm going to look at the help documentation of the command, linear model command for regression equation. I specify the formula, I specify the data set, and that's, really all I need for my very basic regression command. I'm not going to get too into it. I just want to create the results and do it in an inline text. So I'm looking at some of these examples here, and I see, that's kind of the format I want to do with this tilde in between. So I do lm mpg space tilde space wt to predict miles per gallon based off weight. I tell R that the data set is equal to empty cars. And I press enter to realize that, yep, that is in fact the correct code. It worked. So I'm going to copy and paste that above in my inline text. Boom! And I end it with a backtick. And you see it kind of changes colors again. So now I'm going to knit these results and see what I get, because the output just might surprise you. Here's my output. I'm going to scroll past all the stuff that I know works, and whoa, hold the phone, operator. When I was looking at the output presented here in the console window, it just showed the intercept and like the coefficient. What's all this other stuff that's included? This looks super jumbled. I don't like that. So I'm going to close out of that, and this needs fixing. The first step I do, I go to my console window, I type in the same linear regression command. Yep, that is just the output. I'm going to type it again. But this time, at the end, I'm going to include a hyphen and a caret, which looks like an arrow key. And I'm going to call this reg1. I'm going to save the output of a linear regression model as an object called reg1. And immediately as I do that, I see up here in my environment tab, reg1 is displayed. List of 12. If I click on the item, it comes up, it shows the coefficients, just like what I want, just like I was displayed in the output. But there's other items too. That must have been what they printed in the output of the PDF. They included all of these residuals, all of these effects as well. I mean, no wonder it looks so cluttered for me. They printed all 12 of these items in the output. I only want the first one, the coefficients. I don't care about all the other stuff. And so I'll go back to my equation. I'll just start in the console window, testing it out. And if I include this square bracket and a 1 next to it, that will tell R to only export the first part of the regression equation. It shows the coefficients and it shows the weights. Ha ha ha! I'm going to add that into my part right here. So out of my inline code, outside of my parentheses, I had a square bracket and a 1. I close the square bracket. This is called indexing in R. And we're indexing by the number of the element. I could have indexed by the name of the element, coefficients, but I wanted to index this way because I wanted to. I'm going to knit the results to a PDF to view the output. Hopefully it's different. I wasn't crazy about how jumbled the output was before. There was a whole page and a half of other text and numbers that I certainly didn't want in my final product. No. It's done. I scroll all the way to the bottom and I see that, well, the regression equation looks a heck of a lot better. It says, you know, here's the intercept and this is the actual coefficient itself. I mean, that is kind of nice, I guess. I want more out of it than that. It gives me the numbers, but I want to actually create the equation too. So I'm going to build off this just a little bit more. I'm going to, this will be fun. I'm going to store this as an object and then reference the items of the object. Yeah, I want to add, actually, above this regression equation, the correlation coefficient. It wasn't particularly in my objectives. Well, I'm going to add it. Here we go. Generate regression equation. I'll put it in. Correlation, woohoo, added right up there. And I'm going to do this more of an inline code than this. So I'm going to add another inline code with a backtick. I type R, and I'm going to say, actually, I don't even know the correlation command in R. Core, I think it's correlate. No? All right, maybe I spelled that wrong. No. I must be doing something wrong here. Perhaps, oh, there we go. Just one core with one R. There we go. Got the correct. So I'm going to test my correlation. Core with the X being MPG. Or actually, the X was weight. It doesn't really matter what order I put them in. The data set was empty cars. That doesn't work. Good thing I am testing my commands right here. Maybe I'll scroll down, look at some examples here. I think I'll just reference the data set name itself. Core empty cars $ weight correlated by empty cars $ MPG. Aha, there we go. And that tells me that the correlation between predicting miles per gallon based off weight using a linear relationship is quite strong, negatively strong, meaning as the weight increases, the miles per gallon of the car decreases, obviously. Finally, I got that command. Good thing I tested it in the console before putting it in my R inline code. But I complete the inline code, and I actually, the reason why I made this inline code was so I could have the number of the output be mid-sentence. So I'm going to put the linear relationship between weight and miles per gallon is, and I'll put a colon. I'm actually going to put a couple spaces, and I'm going to bold this correlation so I can also apply a text format in addition to a inline code. So I'm going to bold this correlation so it stands out a little more. I'll add a period and 2 spaces at the end of the line to make sure that when my regression equation is printed, then that will be right below it. I'm going to knit this as a PDF, and I am coming towards the close of my objectives here. I remember off the top of my head that I need to fix those links there that weren't working properly. That'll be fine. I need to finish my objectives by doing the t-test, miles per gallon, based off the automatic or manual cars. And that would pretty much conclude this workshop. Then I would shut her down and move on. Finishing touches. But I scroll all the way to the bottom of my results. Hey, check that out. As I said, the correlation comes straight from the R code. Like, you'd have thought that I copied and pasted that in and bolded it. No, it comes straight from the R code. That's exactly what that number is. So I'll close out of this, and I'll add a couple spaces and press enter. So I have new paragraphs and whatnot. I'll add a 4-level heading that says t-test. So here are the t-tests. I will see if automatic and manual cars in this data set have the same miles per gallon. I'm honestly curious. And this one I'm going to do slightly different than the previous R coding that I've done. Before, I've done just an R code chunk. Then I did another just R code chunk, but with chunk options. And then third, I included an R inline code. No code chunk, but it still referenced R code. And now I'm going to do a combination of both of them. I'm going to create an R code chunk, 3 backticks, open up the curly brackets, R. I'm going to assign a name of t-test. And my options that I'm going to include, echo equals false, include equals true. And those are the only options I want. Telling R that, hey, actually run this code in the code chunk, but don't print the text, the code. Actually, I got this wrong entirely. With the, I'm going to scroll down. With the include equals true option, the code chunk will be run and it will be printed. If false, the code chunk will not be included. Oh, it will run, but it won't be included in the documents. Ha ha ha. So that's what I want. I wanted include to be equal to false. It'll still run this code, but it won't display the output based off include equals false, and it won't display the code because include equals false. Now, why would I do that? Well, I'll get to that. I first look at the documentation for the t-test. Question mark t period test is the command I'm looking for. And I see in my help documentation, t-test, x, y, alternative if needed. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom where it shows my examples. It looks just like the regression equation, exactly like it. So I'm just going to use that. And in fact, actually, I'm going to copy this code from the help documentation, and I'm going to put it as a comment in my code chunk so I can easier reference this stuff. So I don't have to look back and forth. I can look up and down. Much better. I'm going to now store this results of a t-test into an object. And I'm going to test it down here in the console window. I'm going to call it results t. Results t for t-test. This is similar to when I did the arrow above, but now I'll just do an equal sign. This is, classic assignment in R. On the left-hand side is the object that I'm going to create. In the middle, an equal sign. And on the right-hand side is what will be stored into the object on the left-hand side. So I want the t-test results. I type t period test from my documentation. I look at the example they provide me, and all I have to do is change the variable names and change the data set. So mpg tilde am, the data is equal to mt cars, yo. And I submit the command. I don't get any error message. Woohoo! And I see over here in results t, that's what got printed. So I'm actually going to just type results t into the R console. That's it. The object that I just created above, and press enter to see my entire output. And when I'm dealing with t-tests like this, all I really care about is the p-value in this case, which is significant, by the way, hey, which means that automatic and manual cars are not equal based off of this data set. And I'll also print, maybe the averages. I don't know specifically. Earlier, I'd used number indexing before. Now I want to use name indexing. Over in my environments list, I click on results t, and I see, well, the statistic, that's the t-stat right here. I don't really care about that. The parameter, the degrees of freedom, I don't really care about that either. But the p-value is what I want, so I got to remember p period value. That's good. Confidence interval is usually helpful as well. If the confidence interval includes 0, then it is not statistically significant. But if it doesn't include 0, well, it is. So I'm just going to display p-value and the averages right here. I wish the averages could be separate it a little bit more. Mean in group 1, mean in group 0. Maybe I can separate that out a little bit more, but that would mean it's a list of a list. That's probably not the case in R, but it's worth a shot, I'd say. So I say results T, and I put a $sign, and I say, well, these are all of the stuff. I'll go right to the estimate, and I'm actually going to store that as another object called numbers. Aha, it is what I thought. This was just a test for me to see if I could separate. Oh, I can. Ho! How about that? That'll be way better for my exporting and using the inline text. Yes, that's good. So, nice. Now I've gotten enough, I think. I'm going to say results T $P.value. I have enough to use my code chunk and to use my inline text. This is exciting. And so I start off, I'd done a lot of these commands here. So this is why I don't want to include my code or the output in from my code chunk here. So it looks messy. I'm going to use the code chunk as my preparation method, as my organization. And then I'm going to use the inline text, like up here, for better placement in my report. Say create t-test results, adding comments, This is just for me, really. And then I'm going to say extract elements of t-test and say p-value. And I'm going to also extract the average of both groups. I'm going to take this results $estimate, arrow key to numbers. I'm going to put that in my code chunk. And that's actually all I need to include in my code chunk, as the other codes will be in my inline text. I make sure to balance out the code chunk with 3 backticks. I start a new line, and now it's as if when I come to this code chunk, RMarkdown's thinking, well, here's some text to the first sentence. I included 2 spaces and then a new line. So whatever comes next is going to be on its own little paragraph. And then this entire code chunk it'll run. The output will be stored into objects, but nothing will get printed. Not the code, not the results. And now I'm going to use my inline text. What did I say? Automatic cars were 0, manual cars were 1. So I'm going to say average of automatic car. I'll put that. And I kind of liked above when I had the correlation bolded. I'm going to roll with that. 2 stars. I add my backtick and R for get ready for some inline code. And this time, I'm actually going to copy and paste right here the number indexing of this numbers element up here. That's all I need right there. Good thing that I had practiced all my commands in the console below. I end the backtick. I end the stars for the bold. I add 2 spaces to the end of my line to create a new line. I essentially put the same thing. Average NPG of, and Let's do that again. Average MPG of manual car. And I'm really going to just take the same R inline text from above, switch that 1 to a 2. I add 2 spaces, I add a new line, and then I'm going to initiate my conclusion. This is like classic conclusion that I typed so many on Intro to Stats. With a p-value as low as boom inline text or inline R code of R results, print the p-value. With a p-value as low as this, I reject the null hypothesis. There is no evidence from this data set that supports the claim that automatic cars have the same miles per gallon as manual cars. Nice little classic conclusion for a t-test, and I've embedded it all with these R inline text. It's gonna look sick, it's gonna look organized and neat and cool. I can't wait to press this knit button, knit it to the PDF, and essentially conclude this intro demo and practice, and boy was it fun. My Markdown is complete. I'm going to even maximize this, scroll all the way to the bottom to see my output. Oh man. Oh, something wrong here with the header. I'll fix that, but look at this inline text. It's bolded. Those numbers are coming straight from the R code. And so is this p-value. Oh, how nice. So I didn't add a space between that 4th hashtag and my text, so that's why it wasn't a header. And I remember I need to fix those links too. So I scroll down, I add a space there, that fixes that problem. And I remember from the sample file they had, to put a link, I could just do carets surrounding the link. I mean, that seems a lot more easy and simpler than what they had provided on their documentation. And this should be the final knitting of the PDF. Okay, anticipated demo complete. I would probably, moving forward, want to maybe switch something with this code chunk, but oh well. The links came along and they worked. They still look kind of ugly, but I could fix that some more. Probably just need some 2 spaces at the end of the line. That's what that problem is. But looks beautiful. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.